Welcome to a very special episode of the Startup Operator podcast. We're going to be discussing agri-tech today. And to do that, I have with me three entrepreneurs who have been innovating in that sector. So we have Alec, who is the co-founder and CEO of Farmart, which offers cashless credit via a virtual framework to smallholder farmers. Thank you, Alec, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Roshan, for having us. It's a complete pleasure.
We also have Rajkumar and Rajiv from PayAgri, which is involved in farmer digitization and really driving value across the agri ecosystem. So thank you, Rajkumar and Rajiv, for joining us.
Thanks, Roshan. Thanks for this opportunity.
Okay, fantastic. It's great to have you guys here. So maybe Rajiv and Rajkumar, why don't you guys give us an understanding in brief of your founding story?
Sure. So me and Rajkumar, we know each other for the last 20 years. So we studied together. Of course, I went more into the banking and financial services space, was working with institutions like ICICI Bank, Citibank. Raj was in the investment banking space. So he was with Industrial Financial Corporation of India. He was with Brand Capital. Then 2012 is when, I came back to Chennai to be part of a rural financial services firm. And that's a time when, Rajkumar quit his investment banking job. He coming from a farming family, he was really concerned with the plight of the farmers that he saw in his hometown, which is Teni. Right. So that made him to kind of, think deeper into it, understand what was happening in the space, because most of the relatives who were into farming, slowly he found that they're all quitting farming and moving to the nearby cities and towns, looking out for jobs. Right. So this led him to kind of, do a bit of a research. And in 2012, he quit his job, got full-time into farming, trading and activities like that. And that's the time when I moved to Chennai. And I was associated with, an agri value chain finance and a rural financial services firm. So we used to interact a lot. Those time I'm talking about 2012, 14. 2014, when I joined as the founding member of a leading agri value chain finance company, we were looking for someone who understands the agri value chain space really well, right? Who could guide us in designing products. Right. See, agriculture is always considered to be a very risky sector to kind of lend. Right. And that's primarily because people don't understand the space well, because you don't have verifiable data with which you can take informed decisions. Right. So that's the reason why, as an agri value chain finance company, we were looking for someone who can help us in giving deeper insights of the space, as well as help us in designing products. And I referred Raj to the CEO of that institution at that time, and then Raj was taken as a consultant. So while we were exploring this space, going deeper into the rural hinterlands, meeting up with, farmers, farmer producer organization, we realized that access to finance is definitely one critical requirement for the segment, but they also face a lot of other challenges, which includes, challenges connected with technology. There is hardly any intervention of technology in this space because 86% of the farming community in India is smallholder farmers, right? They cannot afford, the technology which a corporate farmer would be able to do. Market linkage was a big challenge for them. Input linkage, was a big challenge for them. So we realized that, if we have to do any meaningful intervention in this space, then it has to be a holistic solution. Right. So by just providing access to finance, we are only just scratching the surface. So this actually led to the creation of, PayAgri in 2017 Feb. So we moved out of that organization and we decided to kind of set up this entity. Right. And yeah, so that's the story. Raj, you want to add?
Yes. And as Raju mentioned, it was on farmer who made us to think loud about this opportunity, and hence we are here right now. In my childhood days, I used to visit my village almost every year for vacation. Most of the time, I used to play in the farmlands. But after a very long time, almost after 12 years, it so happened for me to visit my village in 2011. And the kind of village which I saw in 2011 was totally different from what I saw in my childhood days. And there was a lot of activities, farming activities, every household in my village, my neighbors, my relatives, they were into farming. But in 2012, it was other way around, completely shocked. And most of relatives who were into farming, they gave up farming. And my cousins who were supposed to, take over farming from their parents, and they were also not continuing farming, and they went to nearest town to do some petty jobs. So this actually forced me to understand why they really left it. And when I checked with my uncle, he gave hundreds of problems. End of the day, he said, "I'm not even able to uh, get back my capital, and mostly my capital was created from the loan which he took it." And that really made us to think hard. And plus, there are a couple of quotes that came to our mind when we were talking about these plights of these farmers. Mr. John F. Kennedy, the former president of US, in his days he has actually mentioned one very strong statement, which was, farmer is the only person in the economy who buys everything in retail price and sells everything in wholesale price, which is a fundamental mistake. It should be the other way around. If you want to make a profit, you buy it in wholesale price and sell it in retail kind of setup. So that was one fundamental mistake every farmer was facing. The other one, we thought in 2015, there is going to be an inevitable food crisis. To feed 900 billion, 9 billion people, it is going to be a big challenge. The statistics shows that not even 60 to 70% of the world population is going to get enough food in 2050. So one side, farmers are giving up farming. Other side, there's a huge growth in population, and all these major problems made us to think we have to do something in this segment. We got to create solution for these farmers so that they will stay back in farming and continue to give us food. So these kind of thoughts made us to really think more about this segment, and we did a lot of study to understand more about farming, and we became a farmer. We became farmers first. We took lands on lease in Madurai region, and we were doing a lot of farming activities that helped us to learn finest points and nuances of this farming. Then we did other activities in agri value chain, something like aggregating materials from neighboring farmers and trying to sell it in mandis. Then we were also doing exports. So this all helped us to learn this segment, understand the deeper problems in this segment, helped us to build this pay agree.
Right. Okay, that's plenty of things we can go back to, and explore in further detail. But I'd like to get to Alec. Alec, help us understand your founding story as well.
Sure. Thank you, Roshan, firstly for having us, on this podcast. I've been following it for actually a while before Akanksha told me about it. So I was pretty thrilled to actually come on board. So yeah, our story is about 4.5 years old. We are a venture of three founders. It's Lokesh Singh, Mehtab Singh Mans, and me. So my background is mostly in development finance. So I used to work predominantly in helping the government move on to their cash transfer schemes onto digital around the Aadhaar payment scheme. Typically consulted, various ministries, and after that, I also worked on multiple projects for the World Bank. So my core segment was basically rural, understanding rural communities, understanding how financial inclusion works, what kind of penetration, both in terms of mobile access as well as financial access, happens in the last mile. Why we chose agriculture, or why I chose agriculture, to be honest, I belong to a farming community from Punjab. So it's called the Jat Sikhs. So my grandfather was a farmer for 85 years of his life. Spent a lot of time like Rajkumar in his farm during my summer vacations. And this was 2015 when actually the Aadhaar revolution was happening. And I saw what Aadhaar could actually can be leveraged to grow and reach the masses. And I felt that moment when I was sitting in the veranda with my grandfather, and my grandfather said, there's so many startup activity happening. There were the Olas of the world, there were the Flipkarts of the world being built. And he said that he was extremely well learned man. So he had won multiple awards in agriculture from various chief ministers. And he asked me this questions, asking why isn't someone focusing on agriculture as a sector in the tech space, where 50% of our population is directly or indirectly involved in that sector, and it's an evergreen sector, as we can see in COVID, right? So in that moment, it just in a flash of a moment, I realized there was something which he said that really touched my heart. So we are definitely one of the largest community countries in agriculture. It's growing at a healthy 6 to 7%. Mobile penetration is becoming more and more accessible, and data penetration is basically also reducing in terms of pricing. So I just felt that keeping all the macro trends into perspective, agri sector is going to be having a lot of startup ecosystem in the next 5 to 10 years. Yes, it's not sexy, it's not cool, to be honest, but slowly it's becoming more and more sexier to be entrepreneur or a farmer, to say. And with that vision, I called on my two friends, one Lokesh, who's actually my boss, and Mehtab, who's my childhood friend from my boarding school, the Lawrence School Sana. And we just took off, and we've had multiple journeys. We started with Uber for tractors, moved to agri financing, and now we are mostly a product first company which helps merchants with building stronger relationship with their farmers, either through a CRM app or through providing access to finance or market linkages. So we've had a long journey. I would say we are still very young, but extremely passionate about the sector and the growth prospect of it.
Fantastic. Yeah. So Rajiv, I'll come to you after this. Uh, Help us understand, how does the farmer make money? I mean, it's very simple looking at it from the outside, but I'm sure, I mean, there are a lot of complexities involved. Can you help us understand the ecosystem as such? How does the economics of it work?
Typically, if you look at it, as I mentioned earlier, 86% of the farming community in India is smallholder farmers, which is, farmer owning a land of anywhere in the range of 1 acre to 5 acres, right? And this is one segment which is completely under the control of middlemen. Right, starting from, let's say, purchase of inputs to the activities that he does as part of the cultivation, from getting labor, financial support to market linkage. For all these activities, he is dependent on a middleman, and that is precisely the problem that today India is facing. Not only India, I would say, any developing countries for that matter. The multiple layers of middlemen or array of middlemen which exist in the backward linkage as well as the forward linkage is actually squeezing the farmer from all sides. So when that happens, today the farmer is actually not in control of the farming activity that he does. He purchases inputs at the highest price, and then he doesn't get access to finance from formal financial institutions, so he's dependent on informal sources, which is a money lender, wherein the rate of interest is anywhere from 50% to, let's say, 300%, right? And there is no technology intervention, so which means he is not able to get best of the yields, which otherwise his counterpart in developing countries would have got it, right? And similarly, once the harvest is done, he has to kind of sell it to the middleman or the trader, right? He doesn't have a direct access to the market. Now, when you look at all these activities, if you find that the farmer is the one who makes the least money in the entire agri value chain, right? And there are data points which says that, many times from the harvest, he's not even able to make sufficient output for his own consumption, forget about selling it, right? So this is the plight of the farmer, right? So unless until we find a solution to this, it becomes a little difficult, especially for an agrarian economy like India.
Right. So Alec, on that point, right? I mean, and something that you mentioned earlier as well, that, I think roughly 60% of our population is employed in some form of agriculture. And I think it constitutes 20 to 25% of GDP, if I'm not mistaken. Right. So is this, as Rajiv mentioned, is it a question of like aligning interests and that, or is it like productivity, or what do you see as some of the challenges in terms of helping farmers be more successful and helping them make more money?
So Indian farmland is actually one of the most fertile grounds of soil fertility anywhere in the globe. The challenge here is we are actually overemphasizing that the large part of our population actually engage becoming a farmer. I am of a firm believer we need land consolidation. There's no two words about it. But that is not obviously the case, because services sector has not even to being kept up to increasing the amount of jobs that could be created, right? So ideally, in an economy, let's say the most forward-looking economy, let's say the US, has less than 2% of population who's actually involved in agriculture, and they have far larger spaces of land, right? In India, if you say 50 or 60% of our population is in agriculture, it's a really sad thing. It needs to go down to at least, I would say, 30% for making it more remunerative, making it extremely profitable. But if that is not the case, what we have with us today, how can we come up with better solutions? Yes, nutrition, crop diversification, less government control, removal of the APMC Act, which just took place, is a really good step in the right direction. All this will act like a catalyst, but also private investment, more and more entrepreneurs and startups working in this space, less of government intervention, and more privatization needs to take place. Because when privatization will actually take place, what will happen is there'll be more clarity in the value chain, like Rajkumar and Rajiv just mentioned. You can have more food traceability. When you have more food traceability, you'll understand why the farmer can actually drive a lot of value at who's the more important player of the value chain. So with all those things happening, there is a value which these middlemen were playing in the past, and they will continue to play that value. It's now up to the private sector, along with right policy support by the government, to help the farmers actually earn more in the future. Because by the end of it, after roughly 4.5 years of staying in the sector, really engaged in both the forward linkage or the input side and the output side, I have come to realize that you cannot sell something to the farmer. So by selling, you cannot sell a software to a farmer. You cannot accept him to buy and try a new input or a new seed or a new crop variety, until unless you actually help him with his output first. So you have to kind of help him link that output to the market, see the benefit, and then though that community becomes a very strong follower of your brand or your company. So the main problem is actually the wallets are extremely squeezed. So you cannot expect the farmer to pay for maybe a satellite imagery app, or you basically cannot make him pay for something which is of not hard utility for him. So that's some of the learnings I have learned over a period of time talking to a lot of farmers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I think the number one investment would be fertilizers and sprinklers and so on and so forth, right? Which are
Yes,
like
yes.
hard utilities, as you mentioned. So Rajkumar, want to come back to this point that I spoke to Alek and Rajiv about, which is, how do we get our farmers to start thinking like entrepreneurs? Because, food is such a basic necessity. As you mentioned, I mean, there are 9 billion people in the world and there's a food shortage. How do we get our farmers to start thinking like entrepreneurs and not be associated with poverty so much, so because right now it's synonymous, given and for valid reasons, right? I mean, considering that they suffer the worst of price control, very complicated supply chain, all of those challenges that all of you guys have mentioned. So how do we get them to start thinking like entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, if you deeply look into the farmer's life, I think they are the most risk-taking entrepreneur we could ever see, and they are aware of the risk, and they are willing to take that risk. And whenever they fail, and they are the fastest one to jump back and redo that activity. So they are aware that they are entrepreneur. But the problem is like to make them as a successful entrepreneur. I strongly believe that there is no enough infrastructure support to handle their output or inputs. That's what I basically feel it. For example,
Yeah.
when I say infrastructure support, as a first effort of Paygree, we wanted to create direct market linkages. So we went to one very large brand of a retail chain brand. Uh, so we said we are coming from Theni region. We work with a lot of farmers, especially in coconut segment, coconut value chain. So, would you like to support farmer by directly procuring from them? And the procurement head of that particular retail chain, they was very happily said, yeah, we are willing to support farmers, willing to procure directly from them. But I have couple of constraints. One, I cannot pay immediately. I need at least 1 week trade credit because that is our policy. Number two, I need a coconut that weighs exactly between 500 grams to 550 grams. So these are the specifications. Then when we went back to the farmer, when we told him about this requirement, they said, sorry sir, I need money moment you are taking it from my farm. So the first opportunity of direct connectivity with the end user, it's already negated. The second one, when we say 500 to 550 grams, he coolly said maybe you should invent a particular breed of coconut tree that could get me only that particular weight of, of coconuts. So he says, my coconut tree gives me a coconut weighing ranges between 200, 250 grams to 800 grams. If I give you only that 500 to 550, where will I sell the remaining? So this made us to think, very deep into this one, and realize that this is the gap that is causing or that is encouraging a lot of middlemen to come and play in their life and exploit the value. So we decided to establish, first we decided to study the coconut value chain in detail, and we realized if we have to buy it from a farmer, the entire 200, 250 grams to 800 grams, then I need to have a bias for all these grades. So when we did our detailed coconut value chain study, we realized a coconut weighing between 250 grams to 400 grams, generally you can sell it to Kirana stores. And for or places like where they make copra and they manufacture coconut oil. Then 400 to 500 grams, all the small Kirana stores. For 500 and 600, somebody like Reliance Fresh, Big Basket kind of people. And 600 and above, you can sell it to hotels. So then we realized we got to have an infrastructure where we can bring all this coconut, grade it, pack it, and deliver it to multiple buyers. And to get a full load of coconut, we need to procure it from at least 5 to 6 farmers. So at farm gate level, you need to have an infrastructure where you can aggregate coconuts from different farmers, bring it there, and transport it. So there is an infrastructure requirement at farm gate level till it reaches the consumer. Maybe if government or private players like us are able to create that infrastructure that can be easily accessed by these farmers, I think we can solve this problem and farmers can
Right.
really act like an infrastructure,
Right.
act like an entrepreneur by using this infrastructure.
Right. So, Rajiv, how is the government involved at this point in the farmer's life? If you can just help us understand that.
See, the government intervention, see, to a certain extent, yes, it is good, to have government intervention. But from certain other perspective, if you look at it, it may not be all that great, right? Where it is good is, I would say, let's say, in terms of creation of this farmer producer organization, right? There have been some recent reforms which talks about creating another 10,000 farmer producer organization and cluster based organization, which will basically help the smallholder farmers in a big way. Because one of the reasons why we need an FPO is because, as I mentioned earlier, smallholder farmers, they don't have the collective bargaining power, right? So once 1,000 farmers join hands together, then we are talking about, let's say, if everybody has got 2 acres of land, then you're talking about 2,000 acres, right?
Right.
With that, it becomes much more easier for you to kind of, negotiate inputs with an input manufacturer or negotiate with banks for loans or, with an institutional buyer. Right. So these things, from the government side definitely helps. But yes, when you say an institution like farmer producer organization needs a lot of hand-holding and support, which currently the government is doing it through institutions like NABARD and SFAC, right? To a greater extent, we are able to see the changes in the FPO segment because of that. Right. So these are all, in my opinion, very, very positive steps. So more initiatives, in this regard would definitely help. also in terms of providing better access to finance through public sector banks and initiatives like that, like the priority sector lending target, which the government has issued to all the banks, which says that 40% of the loan, the credit that a bank gives, should be towards priority sector, and out of that, agriculture plays a very vital role. So I think, in my opinion, if my understanding is right, around 12% has to be directly towards agriculture sector, right? So these are positive interventions from the government side. But certain other intervention which might not be really good for the sector is like like what the government had earlier, in terms of restricting the
Mondays and stuff.
prices market. Yeah, exactly. The good part is, that has been taken off now,
Yeah.
as part of the recent reforms. So this is going to definitely help the farmers in the coming months, is what we feel.
Right. So, Alec, one of the challenges that has been mentioned is the market linkage, right? And I often wonder why we can't have an Amazon for farm produce as such, which could be like a direct-to-consumer technology platform. Is that something that is a possibility in the future? I mean, it's already happening.
So every entrepreneur's dream is actually to build a farm to consumer business, like it's called
Right.
F2C, right? But what's happened over time is the entire segment is broken now into three segments. So one is the B2C. So I would put B2C clients as, the Amazon Fresh, or, the Flipkart or Big Basket, right? Then is the B2B. So B2B is primarily trading. So they have large scale traders, medium sized traders, commission agents who are doing B2B trading. And then there's F2B. Now F2B would categorize someone like PayAgri, where they are buying from farmers and kind of reaching the either the traders or corporates or businesses, right? So this entire segment has its own set of challenges, and it's not easy to build this entire thing from farmer to consumer. The challenge is there's a level of investment and a different strategy that goes into building a B2C brand versus building a F2C brand. Now, if I'm going to, let's say, Big Basket, I will want to also have my entire basket ready, right? I just don't want to go to Amazon for two products. I would want to go to some other website for two products. So it's something where a company needs to navigate in which segment they want to enter first, and then work backwards. So, for example, example I would like to give you is there's close to, I would say, 20-30 billion dollars which has been invested in the B2C segment now, right? And B2C segment is slowly now moving in towards the F segment, reaching directly to farmers. So a lot of investment is now going to improving the efficiency and improving margins. The initial investment went into building a consumer base. And now what these companies have realized is that if you actually want to improve your margins, you have to work towards the farmer, increasing traceability, improving the quality of the produce you're buying, the freshness of the produce. And then this entire value chain plays out, right? So it's actually a matter of time where different companies will build different expertise, and some will get absorbed by some other company in terms of acquisition or mergers. But some companies will be able to go from F2B to eventually being B2C companies, or some
Right.
companies will go from B2C to becoming direct to F companies. So it's an extremely complex problem in terms of the entire value chain. But slowly and steadily, I've seen this play out in my own experience, that like Zomatos of the world are now rolling out Hyperpure, which they want to help restaurants source produce. So it's just something which is a normal phase of life, and normal cycle of a startup ecosystem. And eventually we would be as efficient as a US big box stores, or Trader Joe's, where there's the entire value chain plays out extremely nicely. It's just
Right.
early days, still very early days.
Right. Right. So, Rajkumar, on that same note, right, one of the things that's also talked about is the huge wastage in food, right? I mean, we don't have proper facilities, wholesale places to store this food as well. And, a lot of it is wasted of the order of, 20% or more, in fact, right? Any innovation that you see there that could be helpful, actually?
Uh, Actually, if you look at the trends of agri-tech companies right now, and most of these agri-tech companies who are innovating solution, they are focusing on secondary problems in this agri value chain. So we see there are two layers of problems: primary problems, secondary problems. Primary problems are like getting right value or the income for these farmers, and utilization of available precision farming technologies to reduce the cost of cultivation and improve the yield. The third primary problem is like, as you rightly said, it's a food wastages. But it's I hardly I have seen a good innovation in this segment. But there are some good R&Ds going on. For example, in one of the companies are incubated in Tamil Nadu Agriculture University. They are building organic and nano-based technology that will improve the shelf life of any fruits and vegetables. So it is non-toxic, and just for example, banana. Generally, when a banana gets ripened within 4 or 5 days, you got to consume it within maximum 5 or 6 days. But when you dip that particular banana in this particular organic nanotechnology solution, it will extend banana's life at least by 10 to 12 days. But it's still in very early stage, and to make farmers to use it at large scale. Now, obviously, there should be large scale of production should be happening, and only then it could be an affordable proposition for these farmers. And
So I'll
apart
just
from
sorry. Yeah, Raj, sorry to interrupt.
apart from these kind of technologies, then obviously, as I mentioned earlier, you got to create proper cold storage facilities at the farm gate level as well as consumer level. And
Sure.
presently, there are cold storages available, not enough, not sufficient to handle even 5% of the entire Indian food production.
Right. Yeah, Alec, you had a
So
point?
yeah, just wanted to add something here. So in markets like India, most of the wastage actually takes place at the first mile, which is almost at the farmer or the first mandi mile. In forward markets like maybe the US, Europe, most of the wastages happen at the last mile, which is at the consumer level. Food which doesn't look like proper food is wasted, and so on and so forth. What is actually India's problem is that we need to solve the wastage at the first mile. And that can only be happening, like Rajkumar said, by two ways. Either you kind of add some shelf life product which increases the shelf life of products, or actually cold storage and micro cold storage. So we need to have more like a distributed cold storage mechanism. We don't need to build 100 crore projects in one district, one region, then you can't find anything for another 100 kilometers. We need to have a extremely laser focused, maybe even a panchayat level cold storage units, and this is actually doable. It's not something which will take a lot of capital. Agriculture is being allocated close to $25 billion a year in terms of just infrastructure development, and you can do it at almost like a panchayat level. You can just have micro storage at also like solar driven micro storage, so it doesn't even use electricity to basically do a lot of that work. Like one company is EcoZen, which has been doing some really cool work around that, having micro storage. But then it comes around affordability. Is the farmer the right person to pay for it? I don't think so. It should be a pay-per-use model. Maybe the government can put in the investment in these regions, and then slowly, as a pay-per-use service, farmers will pay for it. So it's actually, the solutions are there. It's actually the will of the policymakers, of private sector, to basically derive value from that.
Right. Right. So one of the things that we also spoke about, Rajiv, was the access to finance and any kind of financial products or innovation, right? I mean, whether you call it loans or insurance or whatever it is. You come from a banking background as well. So do you see that changing as such? I mean, recently we had this case of ICICI using satellite data to decide their lending and stuff like that. So do you see some kind of innovation happening on that side? I mean, more products for farmers and agricultural entrepreneurs as such?
Definitely, definitely. In fact, we ourselves are in discussion with a lot of actor companies, which has got cutting edge solutions, which would basically help, banks and even insurance companies, in taking an informed decision. Right? As I mentioned to you earlier, one of the reasons why banks and financial institutions are finding it very difficult to kind of lend to the segment is because you don't have verifiable data. Today, let's say you and me, go to a bank and apply for a loan. we can give our bank statement, IT return, Form 16s, and things like that, right? But in the case of an agriculture farmer, that's not available. Now, then the question is how me as a banker take an informed decisions, right? There has to be some kind of a data points, right? So this is where technology would, play a vital role and give a lot of that comfort factor to the banks and institution, which will help them to kind of enhance their penetration, right? Like one of the activities what Payagri has done is to digitize the data of the farmers. Because today, you don't have any data, right? You don't even know, let's say if I as a banker wants to give loan to a farmer, I don't have any data, which I can go through or verify, right? So proactively, what we have done is when we work with farmer producer organization, we try to digitize the data of all the members. We are trying to capture around 150 different fields of information, which we split into two parts. One is the KYC related information, and the other one we call it as KYF, which is nothing but know your farm, the farm level data. Now, this data collection, would help in a big way when it comes to kind of, providing access to finance to these farmers, right? We are also working on some more, fintech solutions like creating a scorecard at the FPO level. Because today, if you look at it, FPOs, are finding it again very difficult to kind of take loans from bank, because banks don't give loans unless otherwise there is a collateral, right? And you can't expect a farmer producer organization to kind of, present a collateral for that matter, right? So these are areas where, we are trying to help. We are also in discussion with a couple of actor companies which could provide this weather-based data, which could basically help in contract farming later point of time, right? And so all these technologies basically would give more confidence to banks and financial institutions in making this segment more lendable. Yeah.
Right. Right. Rajkumar, any other technology interventions that you can think of that could improve productivity and output for farmers?
No, actually, the precision farming technologies are age-old in invention, but it is yet to take deeper inroads in with small and marginal farmers. So basically, the whole idea of precision farming technologies are nothing but use the fertilizer only what your soil or your plant needs. But we have a general practice like if it is a maize, day one apply so much X amount of DAP, 10th day apply X amount of urea. So this is a general trend we are using it, but we never analyzed what exactly soil needs or what is the exact deficiency in soil. Is it nitrogen or phosphorus or potash? Because for which you need to take you need to soil test. But if you look at an Indian condition, you have one soil test laboratory for 1 million farmers, which is impossible to test and give results to all these farmers. So there are a lot of innovations happening. Even a company where we are closely associated, they have built this digital soil test. It's the FarmSys. The company name is InformSys. They have built digital soil test gadget. So it's a spectrometer based. Any farmer can take it and put that small gadget in the soil. It can throw the nutrition levels of the soil within 10 seconds. In a vernacular language, even to a normal mobile. So such kind of technologies and frugal technologies are very critical at this stage to achieve the precision farming objectives. Yeah.
Right. So Alec, I want to come back to you about something that's been mentioned often, which is government as a player in this whole ecosystem, right? And recently we've seen UP, MP have announced a bunch of, I think even Gujarat has announced a bunch of reforms, right? I think the Mandi system has been, I don't know if it's been altogether eliminated, but I think it's been made redundant, so on and so forth. What are some reforms that you think that the government can undertake to, help farmers as such?
So I think some initiatives are already in place. There's an infrastructure development fund for developing warehousing, logistics, as well as cold storage chains for farm like at both at farm gates, at district level, and at city levels. There's definitely the APMC Act removal was a landmark kind of a judgment. I think the timing worked really well because COVID happened, and a lot of bottleneck happened. So I think the timing of that was extremely crucial for the sector. And in terms of other interventions, I think removal of the Essential Commodities Act is also extremely good, because think about it. Like, imagine if you had a really good year of manufacturing, and suddenly the prices in the market really shot up. Government suddenly comes in and says that you have to sell at a lower price, or you can't hold, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense. So similarly, in Kolar, when there's a good onion, the onion season, the economy thrives. Like, you had like 300 or 400 tractors being sold of John Deere in one go. So government only has to play a role of a mediator. It cannot play a role of protecting the middle class only, because at the cost of protecting the middle class, inflation in the country, you are actually sacrificing more than 500, half of the population into this chaos. And
Right.
growth cannot only be driven by market economies. It has to be driven by rural economies also. There is a trend in the global perspective that rural economies have a more important role to play than actually city economies, because of there's already so many challenges around living in the city now. So that is something which we need to be extremely aware of. The other thing is thing which the government need to focus on is on imports and exports. Suddenly when the prices of wheat are going up in the country, we start importing more wheat from Russia. It doesn't make sense. Like, you should support your own country, own farmers. Try to buy as much from them. Try to help them export the products in forward markets. So those are where value will be created over a period of time. The internal consumption of the country is okay, but how are you going to push your product into other markets, which is the main challenge which the economy is dealing with at this point of time. And the main challenge around that is of quality. Your produce is not of that quality of global consumption. How do you work with local companies, large scale enterprises, small scale NGOs, to help go do massive outreach programs to help and make the farmer understand of what is sellable in the international market, what is sellable
Right.
in the national market. So there is a lot of money that gets pumped, but as an entrepreneur in the last 5 years, I don't know where it goes. Like, every year there's a budget of billions of dollars being sent into the market. Like, for where it is go, we all don't know it.
Right.
So it's kind of funny.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I always feel like the government has these easy answers, or I don't know, I mean, convenient answers for the agriculture sector, right? They prefer giving farm waivers or loan waivers rather than undertaking some fundamental reforms. Anything else, Rajiv, that you see that could help the farming sector as such? I mean, recently I think Enam or something of that sort as well. The trading portal was launched.
Yeah.
Anything to that effect that could aid the farming community?
I think a couple of points, which I strongly feel is needed. See, one of the good things what the government has done is to promote more farmer producer organization, right? So that would definitely help smallholder farmers in a big way. But on one side, while you promote FPOs, you also need to kind of handhold them with a lot of capacity building activities, right? See, once a farmer producer organization is formed, you're expecting them to kind of work like a company, right? They have a board, they have a CEO, and they should be working for the welfare of the farmer members, wherein every farmer member is a shareholder in that farmer producer company. But in reality, what we have seen is that 90% of this farmer producer companies are inactive, right? And why they are inactive? Because they don't know how to function it like a company. They don't have the farmer members. They don't have confidence, on the office bearers on the board of the company, right? So this is where probably the government, through its institutions like NABARD and SFEC, should conduct more capacity building activities, which will definitely help in FPOs to kind of coming up the ladder. Second thing which I strongly feel is we need more frugal innovation. When I say frugal innovation, I'm talking about innovation which is affordable for a smallholder farmer, right? Today, if you look at it, the good part is, after the COVID, there are a lot of, startups in the agtech space. And I was told that it's somewhere in the range of 400 to kind of 500 startups in the agtech space, which is really great. But my question is, how many of those startups are providing in a solution which a smallholder farmer can afford, right? If we cannot afford, then you're talking about 84% population being not being the target segment, which means you're catering only to the balance 16%, which anyways don't need your help, right? So that is one area, where there has to be a lot of focus. And the other critical part is, of course, on the financial linkage part, right? Government probably should stop this loan waiver things, because that's killing the market. Instead of that, it could come out, subsidize the farm insurance. That would be a much better way of, doing it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
another area, I think, to add, Rajiv, one more area where government can really play a very critical role is like government has already identified clusters for various value chains, and you need to create processing facilities, infrastructure in those clusters. For example, if it is a dal cluster, tur dal cluster. So today, what's happening is farmers give this tur dal to the millers. Millers process it and they sell it everywhere. And sometimes these millers also import some kind of tur dal, and it gets mixed with Indian tur dal also. So if government is able to identify this cluster and create this processing facility, where even a small farmer with only half an acre and hardly two quintals of output, they can come to that infrastructure, they can process it, and they can sell it in their local economy itself with good rates. So
Right.
these kind of critical infrastructure to process and pack it, and packaging is another. Today we all know that if the quality and the price can sell a product, its contribution is hardly 70%. And good packaging can always attract a better price and better good amount of consumers or customers. So farmers never had that opportunity to pack their produce and sell it. Maybe when government creates such kind of packing infrastructure in those clusters, and along with this farmer producer company support, and these farmers can pack and they can sell it in their economy. So
Yeah.
these things could make a lot of difference in farmers' life.
That was actually going to be my question to you, which is, how do we build strong export capabilities? I mean, Indian coffee, for example, is amazing, but how do we, some of these crops, how do we package it and sell it to the world?
Yeah, obviously, you got to tell the truth that Indian farmers make some of the best of the coffees, and this coffee board, they've been doing good job already. But still, the problem is like a farmer is not able to export it by himself. There are a lot of intermediation, and they procure coffee, they process it, send it, because it is capital intensive. So only with government intervention and creating such infrastructure at the farm gate level can solve this problem. And of course, as Rajiv said, farmer producer companies can play a very vital role in this kind of thing. And last week we purchased pepper and cold pressed gingerly oil from farmers producer company. And actually, Paygree, we help them to design their, brand them and design the packaging. And today we're able to sell it in almost entire parts of Tamil Nadu. So you need to work with FPCs, private players like us, startups like us, government should work with these FPCs and educate them about the importance of this packaging and help them in create a proper packaging and market it on behalf of them. Only through this kind of pattern we can solve this problem.
Right. So, Alec, what advice would you have for any of the budding entrepreneurs listening to this, or people who are generally curious about the sector, right? What should they know? What should they beware of before entering into the sector,
Yeah, so my one strong advice is, don't try to sell to the farmer, buy from the farmer, help him kind of increase his income first, and then the trust follows, and then you can do a lot of serious innovation there. Second is, it's extremely, extremely exciting sector to work with. It's extremely personally fulfilling. You get a sense of, not only adding something to your community around you where you live, but also to the greater good of the nation. It's extremely fulfilling to be an agri entrepreneur, to be honest, versus if I was doing some other thing. The third piece of advice is just it is a sector which you have to be very resilient. It is that you have to be really at it like any other job, but you have to really understand the farmer, understand his balance sheet, understand his perspective, his mindset, and then work upwards from them. So it's extremely bright. I encourage anyone to start a company in this space and because we need it more than anything else. The space needs it, the farmers need it, the nation needs it. It is extremely fulfilling as a profession.
Right, absolutely. Rajiv, final thoughts from you in terms of how someone can get started in the space. So how do they do the whole 0 to 1 journey?
It's very simple, start farming by yourself, you'll automatically learn, right?
Right.
So if you have to do anything in this sector, first and the foremost thing, what we did was go to the farmland, understand the plight of a farmer, understand how the value chain works in its entirety. Then you'll be able to kind of identify the gaps and also the opportunity that exists in the sector.
Right. All right. So that's all the time we had on this episode. Thank you so much for joining, guys. Rajiv, Rajkumar, Alec, really appreciate your time. A lot of fascinating insights. I'm sure our listeners will be reflecting on plenty of these insights going forward, and might serve as a primer for anyone interested in the agri-tech sector. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for hosting us. It's always a pleasure to talk about our journeys and connect with passionate people like you.
Right. Thanks a lot, Roshan. It's been a privilege for us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Roshan. It's wonderful chatting with you after with other team.